Hi, welcome back to Learning in Real Time. I'm Melissa, and this is my fourth episode that we're going to talk about today. So one thing I'm learning in real time right now is my camera and the setup for the podcast, because my sister said when she listened to my last podcast, there was a really high-pitched noise, which I found out came from my mic, the wireless mic. So I haven't been able to get another mic. I'm trying to get a corded one to plug in so I can just hold it. There's no wireless interference. I thought my camera wouldn't do that, but I guess it's a cheap mic, so that would be why. So I'm trying to do that. My voice, I'm hoping, sounds okay. I'm using my camera's internal sensor, or mic, internal mic. And so we'll see how this sounds. Hopefully this sounds better than the high-pitched noise, and hopefully next week we won't have any of these problems. And this is why it's great to learn. And every week it seems like there's been something with the podcast. Running out of battery, my mic running out of battery, my SD card was full, all of that. So this week we have the mic and the high-pitched noise. Hopefully next week we'll get some of the kinks, or I'll get some of the kinks out. So one thing that happened this week that I've been trying to figure out, what can I learn from? How can I grow from this? How can I do things differently in the future? And it is conflict. My husband and I had some conflict, which is normal in a healthy relationship, but it got me to notice something about conflict in general. There was a situation that happened, and yet both of us experienced the situation completely differently. And it got me thinking, okay, so we go through a situation. Like with my husband and I, we went through a situation. There was something that happened that caused, hey, this is my thoughts on it. This is my experience that I've had of it. This is my background. This is the way that I've interpreted it and how I'm choosing to look at it, my thoughts about it. And that's what I'm bringing to what's happening. Then my husband has over here his thoughts, his experiences, his life experiences, his thoughts about it. And then he brings his thoughts, everything to the situation. And when both of them are so different, because of what they are and because of how my thought's one thing and his thought's the other thing about it, then it creates conflict because our thoughts aren't the same. So then I started to realize and think, hey, it's not actually the situation that is so hard or the situation that is creating this conflict between us. It's, hey, there's an event, and yet both of us interpret the event, both of us look at the event completely differently, and that's where the conflict comes in, because we both bring our experiences, we bring our thoughts, bring our emotions even to the situation, and then the conflict comes. So it caused me to look at, hey, the situation's the same no matter what. It's what we bring to the situation that creates that conflict. And then even how we responded to it before we even, in the moment, I wasn't thinking all of this. It wasn't until later and afterwards I started thinking, hey, there was just a situation. But it wasn't even the situation. It was each of us bringing our own thoughts, experiences, emotions to a situation. Then it's, okay, so once that happens, once we bring all of that, and a lot of it's conflict, because in conflict there's misunderstanding, there's assumptions, there's a multiple of things that come from conflict. And then it's, okay, how do I respond to now the conflict, not necessarily the situation? And then how does he respond to the conflict, not necessarily the situation? And even the way we respond to the conflict in there is completely different. So not only do we bring different experiences, different thoughts, different emotions and everything and experiences to the situation, we then respond differently to each other's experiences. And the conflict that's not been created, we each deal with it completely different. And ours, when I was looking at it and realizing and thinking through all of this, to say, hey, this is how I deal with it. This is how we deal with how I feel like he deals with a lot of the conflict. And they're opposite sides. They're complete opposite sides of what I do versus what he does. And so that's where it comes into where the event, the situation, and the interpretation that we bring of the event, each of us, is different. And yet those are two different things. Just like in the podcast last week where I talked about failing at something and being a failure, those are two different things. Being in a situation and interpreting the situation are two different things. And sometimes I think, this is a situation and this is exactly what's happening. in this situation. This is how it is. This is the way it is. This is what it's done to me. All of these different things of this is the situation, where it's like I step back and say, no, well, that's my interpretation of the situation. That's not the situation. This is just how I am interpreting it. My thoughts, my feelings, my emotions, everything I'm bringing and interpreting of the situation, rather than, hey, what's the actual fact? What is actually happening in the moment? And that's what the situation is, not all the emotions and everything and interpretation I'm bringing towards it. And the same with him. It's all the emotions and everything he's bringing towards it is not the situation. And that's where we can confuse the two sometimes, where one person might feel hurt, misunderstood, frustrated about what's happening, and yet the other person might feel defensive, overwhelmed, or confused about the situation. So there's one event and two separate interpretations. And sometimes there's more. Sometimes there's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 100 different interpretations of the same event. And that creates conflict because of the misunderstandings, the lack of communication of what the event actually is, or what's actually happening, or understanding about the other person. And that's where there's a psychological concept called fundamental attribution error. It's basically where we explain our behavior by the circumstance of what's happening. And yet we explain other people's behavior by their character, by what we can see. Because we know our own thoughts, we know our mind, we know the way we're feeling, we know all of our emotions. So when we judge ourselves and look at ourselves, we're looking at all of our internal thoughts, all of the things that we're going through, and we explain it by the situation that's happening. And yet when we look at others and we cast judgment on them, we explain it by who they are or who we make them to be. So as we know ourselves and our thoughts and our emotions and our internal selves, we don't know the other person's internal selves. We just look at how they're acting, what their behavior is. And we look at others' behaviors and say, that's who they are. This is who they are. Because we can't see their internal thoughts. We can't know what they're thinking. We can't know what they're feeling, what they're going through, the experiences they've had. And yet we look at ourselves and then we say, oh, but this is why it is. This is why the circumstance, this is why I'm acting the way I am, because of the circumstance. So let's take an example of just driving on the freeway and someone comes and cuts you off. I mean, sometimes you immediately think, hey, what is this person doing? They don't know how to drive. They're going to hurt someone. They should have been paying more attention. And because of the circumstance, we look at their behavior of cutting us off to say who they are is, this is who they are. They're not paying attention. They're not doing this. We cast all these judgments on them based on their behavior, who they are, and who we assume that they are as a person. And yet, if we look at our own selves to say, hey, maybe we, drove on the freeway, we tried to merge, and we cut someone off. And yet, what do we think about that? Do we think, hey, we're a terrible driver, we're gonna hurt someone? It's usually, hey, I'm in a hurry, I didn't see this person, I forgot to check my mirrors, my kid's screaming in the back, I was distracted by them, and I didn't pay attention over here, or all these things, any of these emotions, we explain because of our internal thoughts. We explain by the circumstance of what it is and our own internal experience that we're having at the moment. And that's where the fundamental attribution error concept comes in. They have their experience, you have your experience, and bringing it together is theirs is going to look differently than you, and yours is going to look differently from them. And that's what creates the conflict and not the situation itself. And then it's how do we respond to the conflict. So like I said, the way I respond is so much different than the way my husband responds. So there's 5 different ways in psychology that they have for conflict responses. There's avoiding, withdrawing, confronting, appeasing, and collaborating. And those are the 5 different ways that people respond to conflict. Not one of those is better than the other. It's just the way that people deal with conflict. So you can have someone who wants to collaborate in conflict and what they're going through, and then you have another person who wants to avoid. And so bringing those together, even the responses to the conflict can create conflict because one person wants to say, hey, let's talk this through. Let's work it out. Let's continue to go forward. And the other person wants to just avoid it and to say, I don't want to talk about it right now. I don't want to do this. And then you have those 2 people coming together and to say, hey, not only do we have, this is our interpretation, but now this is our response to each other's interpretation, our own interpretation of the conflict, our responses to the conflict that we've created for the situation. And it's still different styles and different ways that people view and react to it. And then conflict isn't just in marriage, but then it's broad as a whole, as people, that we have conflict in any relationship or any situation that you can have, because two people are responding to their own experiences of the situation that is happening, not the situation itself. So there can be parenting conflicts with a parent and the child, or two parents and a child, that there's conflict in something that happened, and then the child responds one way and then the parent responds another way. There's conflict in the response for the way a parent and a child. Or in friendships, one friend, something happens, one friend sees it one way, another friend sees it another way, and then there's conflict in a friendship that, if not resolved, can ruin a friendship or ruin a parent and child relationship because of that conflict, because of the way that they're each interpreting it and then responding to their own interpretations. And then there's misunderstanding in general. And that's a lot of where the conflict is, that we're not trying to understand the other person. We're just looking at ourselves and our own internal experience and not trying to understand the other person. And you see that a lot online as well. You have people making comments and someone interpreting the comment. And sometimes it's so hard through messaging, text messaging, or even comments on there to see, understanding the meaning behind it, because there's maybe lack of punctuation or lack of the way that it is said. And so someone can come and have a comment on there, yet someone interprets that comment as a way that then they start responding. And then there's all this conflict that comes with misunderstanding, is the misunderstanding. You don't understand. You're not seeking to understand the other person. So the question I've been thinking about, along with recognizing, hey, this is what happens, is conflict happens when there's a situation that people bring their own experiences to, and then they interpretate it one way or both ways, different ways, and then they respond even to that different ways. And so recognizing that, I think, was the first step for me to say, I don't have a problem with the person that you're having a conflict with. The problem's not between you and them. It's, this is my experience, this is how I see it, and they're not trying to understand my way. And I'm still trying to figure out where to go from, okay, I can see now that I have my internal experiences, I have the way that I respond to conflict, he has his internal experiences, he has the way that he responds to conflict. Where do we go from here now? So I can understand that and see that, but then it's a step further to say, now what? How do we resolve the conflict then that we've created in a situation with our different experiences? How do we respond to the conflict in a way that is productive for both of us? That we can both be understood and both try to understand the other person in a way that's healthy and that leads us to a resolution of whatever conflict it is. So I'm still trying to figure that out, to understand how I can resolve conflict in not just my marriage, but with my kids, with my friends or family members, neighbors, all of that. Today I just wanted to explore how conflict might not always be about the event itself or the situation itself, but where two people or many people will bring their experiences, bring their responses, bring their internal thoughts and emotions to the situation, and both or either or all are trying to all exist at the same time. So I just wanted to explore that a little bit today. And maybe this week I'll try to understand more of, okay, now we need to take it a step further to how we can grow, how we can learn, how we can change ourselves to better handle conflict within ourselves, our thoughts, our emotions, the way that we react to the conflict of what's happening. So if you have any thoughts, if you have any experiences or just want to say hi, let me know. Thanks for listening, and I will see you next week.